Welcome to the Probate Nation. Our show today focuses on the process of selling District of Columbia real estate, either in an estate or a conservatorship. After all the tangible personal property has been removed from the property, often the real estate under your control as a personal representative or conservator is in need of a number of repairs and improvements. But what should you do to maximize the sale price and get the property sold sooner rather than later? It's a good question which our guest tonight will address, along with a host of other suggestions he encouraged you to keep in mind when selling District of Columbia real estate in an estate or conservatorship. With me today is Hill Slawinski, a Washingtonian by birth, a lawyer by training, and a realtor of choice. Hill is a real estate agent with Long & Foster, Christie's International Real Estate. He is a native Washingtonian and a lifelong resident of the Washington area. He attended Ascension Academy in Alexandria, St. Vincent College in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, and the George Mason University Law School in Arlington. He serves on the board and is vice president of the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce and is vice chair of the Economic Development Committee of the Charles County Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome realtor Hill Slawinski. Hill, great to have you.
Well, thank you, Richard.
Appreciate you coming by, share some of your thoughts and all that experience you've garnered over the years. Well, let's get right to it. We're talking about dealing with real estate, whether it's in an estate or whether it's through a conservatorship. And someone has the power to act, and we want to make sure they're duly empowered. And once they have that power, they're going to come to you and begin to talk to me about some of those initial steps we've got to take care of. So, how important, if someone has passed away, is it to get a dated death appraisal of the property?
It's very important to have that first. That's the benchmark for the estate planning purposes and the estate valuation.
Okay. And then the next thing, of course, is we hear about getting a realtor's marketing analysis. What is that?
A comparative or a competitive market analysis is one that I would perform, or any realtor would perform, to get a range of pricing of houses that are currently on the market. You want to know what the competition is for selling this property against what else is available or what else has been sold recently.
Okay. So you try to match it up apples to apples and see how you compare.
Yes.
Okay. How important is it, again, in the initial steps, how important is it to clean the house out?
Most of the time, 99% of the time, you have to have it cleaned out. You're not there to sell the personal property that's inside. You're there to sell the house and whatever is on the land.
Okay, so those content that's left in the house might be distracting to a prospective buyer?
Well, let's put it, for an executor, you usually have it cleaned out anyway because the person has passed away. For a conservatorship, you may still have personal property in the house because the individual may be in a nursing home or in a coma or someplace else. In that case, you may not want to remove all the furniture right away unless you have a place to put it. The family has an idea of what they want to do with it. It is possible to sell the house while it is still furnished, but it's best to have other arrangements made for the furniture.
Okay, good. Tell me a little bit about, we hear about people getting home inspections done when they actually are buying the house, but as an initial step for someone who's thinking about listing a house for sale, how important is it to have a home inspection done at that point?
There are pros and cons for that. The cons against doing a home inspection is that anything you discover that may be a defect in the property, you must disclose.
Okay.
If your house is being sold as it is for an executor, because there's no disclosure requirement, it's exempt from disclosure in the executor relationship. In that case, you may just want to sell it as it is and have the buyer do the home inspection so they're fully aware of what they're getting.
Okay, that's a good point. So the executors, they just sell it as is.
Yes.
That's important. All right, so let's move past now. We've done some sort of initial assessment of the property. We got an idea about value. Let's turn towards property repairs and improvements. Sometimes people can just go crazy with this, okay? But let's talk about what does the typical buyer look for in a home to buy?
The broadest segment of buyer market wants to buy a house that can be moved into right away.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it has to be completely up to date with the new kitchens and bathrooms, although the more recently updated kitchens and bathrooms to the new ones bring a greater price in return. Those homes that are projects that can be done over a period of time, some first-time home buyers may be willing to come in and put in the kitchen that they want to have or the bathroom that they want to have. So it's not necessary to do those improvements. One wise move on the part of sellers is to repaint everything and refinish the floors, especially if it's got nice wood flooring for some of the older houses, the oak floors. At a minimum, that at least presents a house so that it's clean enough to move into and people can work around it with their own schedule to do improvements.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, in the context of doing the market analysis, talk a little bit about the importance of assessing the homes your property will compete against and sort of figuring out what kind of improvements you might need to do.
Well, there's two ways of using that competitive market analysis. You want to see the improvements that are done on the houses nearby or similar homes to yours, so you can gauge what the right price range is for setting a list price. For the homes that have been maintained meticulously over the years, that have new appliances, new flooring, new cabinets, new paint, those houses will bring a higher price compared to another house that don't have the same kind of improvements or not as contemporaneous improvements.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about, should all of the deficiencies that have been identified in the home inspection and in your assessment as a realtor, do those all need to be taken care of?
No, not at all. The value of doing the home inspection when the buyer does it is that they're fully aware of the property that they're getting. Homes in DC are sold as is, okay? But there is a property condition statement that is required of the seller if it's not exempt from the disclosure.
Okay.
So most buyers will know from the seller what the condition of the property is. Their home inspection will give them an idea of how much time is left in the life cycle of the furnace or the vacuum system or the dishwasher, the refrigerator, the appliances. And then they can decide what they're going to do with those. Any deficiencies are a matter of scale. It can be, 3 years old or 30 years old. There's a difference of whether or not you want to make an adjustment for that or put a new appliance in. But if it doesn't necessarily have to be done, you won't need to. Buyers come in all segments. You can have the largest segment of buyers are ones that want to move in right away. But you can have a different market segment also where you have investors who want to do a renovation and sell it or a renovation and rent it. You can have contractors who want to come in and do a total renovation on the inside, so they don't care what the condition of the property is because they'll be able to address that later.
Okay, that's important. So there is different buyer segments, very important. So the work's been identified to be done, by either the home inspection program or by the realtor. Who should do the work typically in these, whatever the repairs or improvements are? Who should do the work?
Well, it's a responsibility of the seller. But the seller has to pay for it, and the seller should make arrangements with licensed contractors because of the permit requirements for the different jurisdictions, especially in DC, and also because this is an investment that they're making to improve the product, the price they're going to be getting on the house.
Okay, okay. Well, let's move to the next stage, if you would, and that's called staging the property. Okay, and I don't mean to make a pun.
No pun intended. Yes.
Of course not. But the property has been cleaned up, it's been painted, the floors have been done, so on and so forth. There's this thing called staging the property that apparently has gained a lot of appeal in the real estate business. Tell me what that is.
Staging is where a seller will hire a company to come in and put other furniture in if the house is vacant, for instance, in the executor relationship, to give a buyer an idea of how certain rooms are used. In the larger homes in DC where you have many auxiliary rooms, you may have a den or a library or a large recreation area downstairs that can be broken up into different uses. Staging actually helps visualize how that space can be used better. For the basic rooms, like the living room, the dining room, the master bedroom, you'd want to have staging in there that would meet the lifestyle of, say, the neighborhood. Some houses would take extremely contemporary furnishings. Some would take elegant luxury furnishings. Some could take Americana historical furnishings, depending on the colonials and things like that, that fit in with the nature of the architecture. The benefit of having a vacant house is you can bring that furniture in. Another work that stagers do is actually act as consultants to owners that own the house. In the conservatorship, they can come in and advise the conservator how they would want to rearrange the furniture, and then where to remove all the other furniture that's surplus, that's not necessary, especially in a clutter situation.
Sure, yes, of course. Yeah. That's a big problem with conservatorship situations. Yes. Those are good points. So, the reason staging is necessary is because
you get a better return for example, every $3,000 you put into, you're going to get $10,000 more in the price.
Is that right?
On average, it seems to happen that way in the mid-range of housing.
Okay.
In DC, you're talking about for the $750,000 to $1 million price range.
Okay.
You'll get more back if it's staged attractively, because once it's attractive to a buyer, you've got over the major hurdle. Anything that's not attracted to them turns them off and they'll go to another property.
Okay, very important. So who makes the arrangement for the stager? Is that the realtor or the homeowner?
I would advise or most realtors advise the sellers which staging company has what kinds of furniture, what their price ranges might be, and encourages the seller to contact the principals in each of those companies. They can decide which ones they want to work with.
Okay, okay. So the stagers have big warehouses full of furniture, apparently.
Some have their own warehouses. Some actually work with just the furnishings that are there. Some have a whole warehouse full of new furniture that they want to use. I've actually had some buyers come into a house that I've staged and said, I don't care about the house, I want to buy the furniture. This looked great, I can put it in my house.
There you go.
Well, I said, well, no, I want to sell the house.
There you go, there you go. Now, is there a cost for staging the property?
There is, and it can be a wide range. It can be the consulting fee just to rearrange what's there, or it can be a monthly fee to have the house furnished. It's delivery, setup, and disassembly and removal. Okay. Most stagers have a 2 or 3 month minimum contract. Okay. And for some houses, you may have it in there for 3 or 4 months if it takes it longer to sell the house, especially for the larger houses.
Okay. Okay. Good. Well, let's move now to, we're at the stage now to actually to present the property and list the property. So in DC, when does the for sale sign typically go in the front yard?
Well, the broker sign will go up in the very beginning of the listing agreement. Okay. It may have a coming soon rider on it, which means that the house is actually going to come on the market within the next 3 weeks. Okay. So the coming soon is kind of a flag saying, get ready, it's coming, but you can't get in to see it until it goes active. The house goes active upon written authorization from the seller saying we're ready to go. All right, and then that sign comes off and you have a for sale on top. Okay, okay. So, and of course, the listing of the property is made active when they're ready to sell. So tell me a little bit, between the time it says coming soon and the time it actually is active, are they able to see pictures and stuff like that typically so they can see the house? If pictures are available, they can. Yes, on Bright, MRIS, or MLS. Most realtors put pictures up as soon as they're available, but that time is also used to complete the renovations, to get the house organized, and to get those pictures taken. So by the time it actually goes active, those photos are already uploaded. But a lot of neighbors, a lot of realtors who work different neighborhoods are very familiar with the houses to begin with. So they pretty much know if they're a townhouse in Georgetown or a townhouse in Mount Pleasant or Columbia, they know what the structure and the floor plan is. The question is, what condition is it in? And that's what the pictures provide. Gotcha.
Let's talk about listing price, because now as we move along here, so, you know, how do you come about and get to a listing price? And I know when we talked about in the pre-interview that you felt that there's like 3 different stages where you actually test the price. Talk a little bit about that.
It's an art, not a science, being able to do this. In coming to a listing price in a competitive market analysis, that tells us what other houses are on the market or have sold recently. We pick a time period depending on how active that market is, that neighborhood is. It can be 90 days or 180 days or even going back a year and a half, because the market has not appreciated tremendously over the last year and a half. But that gives us an idea of what the price range of the actual sales are. That's the key. It's not what the current listing price is, because that's the dream of those sellers. So looking at the sales price of houses and then coming up with a range from a low to a high to present to the seller and say, this is the price range you should be in. But we recommend that you price it somewhere below the top and above the minimum. So if you look at a pyramid, a triangular pyramid, and you have the very top cone on it, that's where you're going to have the fewest buyers because it's the highest price in that market segment. You're going to have another layer that's going to have more buyers. The third layer from the top is going to have the most buyers above your minimum price, and the bottom is going to be one that gets most buyers in there, but they may not make an offer right away. Okay. Depends. You just don't want to overprice it, and that's the real value of doing it this way.
And you do that at the outset. Do you do it again before you actually go live?
It's normally done with a listing agreement, so we set a target based on what we know then. And if the house isn't going to be ready for 2 or 3 months, we'll do it again before the listing goes active, because we want to see what has come on the market, what is sold on the market in those intervening 3 months. It gives us a way to refine it based on what the market trends are. And the trends can go up or down depending on the cycle of the year.
Okay, very good. Very good point.
Regarding listing price, it's interesting. Once a house has been on the market for a while and you do this again during the listing to look at it, you may have to adjust the price down. But then I've had instances where I've actually increased the price and gotten more offers. So
Interesting.
when buyers come to me and say, is there any flexibility in the price? I say, yes, it can always go up. And it's sold when I've done that sometimes.
Interesting. Well, that's interesting. Let's talk a little bit about, there's a thing that we see more and more called seller concessions. Talk a little bit about how that fits into the sales process.
Seller concessions or seller subsidies is a dollar value that's given back by the seller to the buyer for a variety of things. It can be because they've done the home inspection and they realize that there's certain things that need to be repaired or are defective or are on their last legs. The seller may not have known it because they didn't do a home inspection before they put it on the market, or the executor may not have known it because they don't have to disclose and they don't have any personal firsthand knowledge, which is required for a disclosure. So once a buyer comes back, they negotiate, and it can be a range of everything to a few things. The best thing, the most advice that realtors give to sellers is, instead of making the repairs that come up as deficiencies in a home inspection, provide a seller subsidy back to the seller. It helps them with their closing costs in lieu of making the repairs. They can make the repairs at a later date to their satisfaction. Some repairs, if they're done by the seller, may not meet the satisfaction of the buyer, and the deal will fall through. It's best to let the buyer have control over that, because they're going to be living with it from that point on. That's good
advice. Well, let's turn to, you've been in this business for a long time. Let's talk about lessons learned. Is all of this really necessary to sell mom's house when she's passed away or when she needs to go into a nursing home?
What are your goals when you sell the house? I mean, you can go to wholesalers and they'll buy the house for cash with no closing costs, no concessions. You'll see them advertised on TV a lot. They make about 1% of the transactions. The fiduciary responsibility of the executor is to get as much as possible within the ability of the estate to manage it. So if they can put money into it, they can do that and probably increase the price. All these steps are very complicated because this is the largest transaction most individuals will go through. And it's usually the largest asset in an estate. The beneficiaries want to receive as much as possible. They don't want to be shortchanged. So the best thing to do is listen to an experienced realtor, do what they advise you to. Don't try to shortchange it because that will end up coming back and backfiring on you. So these steps are necessary to sell mom's house or dad's house or anybody's.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Can you kind of reach into your toolbox and tell us, our viewers, some of the lessons you've learned over the years through experience in the course of selling residential real estate, things you'd like to pass on?
One thing that's unique about DC is that they have something called the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. It's got a lot of publicity recently on Channel 4. They've had a number of stories on it. This is a form of, as we say, legalized extortion. Tenants in a property cannot be evicted unless they've stopped paying rent. A landlord cannot terminate a lease. The lease moves from whatever the term is to a month to month. As long as the tenant is paying, the landlord cannot tell them to leave. In DC, the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act is a requirement. So if the house goes on the market, the sellers either notify them now and say, the house is going on the market, I'll offer it to you for $600,000. And the tenant has an opportunity to decline that. The seller will move forward, put it on the market, and they may get an offer of $750,000. The seller would go back to the tenants and say, we have an offer of $750,000. Would you like to buy the house for $750,000? Regardless of all the other terms in the contract. Then, if the tenant says, yes, I'm interested, and that's all they have to say. They don't have to say whether they're qualified or they can afford it. Then everything gets put on hold until the next 30 days passes, and then they formally say they're interested. Then they have another 60 days to arrange financing and another extension of 30 days if they need an extension for financing. Then they can come back and say, okay, and we'll settle in 3 months. So right there, you've got 6 months of delay in getting to settlement. After that 6-month period, if they haven't reached a settlement, the whole process starts all over. You have not sold the house yet. In DC, that's changing, we hope, with legislation that's been proposed already, saying that this would not apply to single-family homes or single-family homes with accessory dwelling units, like a Georgetown townhouse with an English basement, that kind of thing. But it's been on the books now for 35 years, and it's wreaking havoc for sellers because they have to pay these tenants to move out. I had one that required $100,000 to move out. Another one where we paid $35,000 to 7 tenants to move out. They agreed, but they cannot waive their rights. They can only decline to exercise their rights.
Okay.
Or they can sell those rights to somebody else who can also hold you hostage.
Interesting.
So the Tenant Opportunity Purchase Act is extremely important, especially in DC if you're a landlord and has an investment property.
Okay, so that's something to keep in mind as far as the process for an executor or a conservatorship is. We
Correct.
need to be concerned about that. That could hold up the whole process.
And you cannot avoid it.
Okay.
And you can't write it, sign it away.
Okay.
You have to go through it.
Well, that's important to know. Let's talk a little bit about get your final comments and suggestions. Again, we've covered a lot of stuff. In the course of getting this property identified, priced, listed for sale, and hopefully gotten it to closing. But out of all those different types of things, maybe you can share a couple of final closing comments with our viewers.
I would recommend that if you're going to look for a realtor to work with you, either as the conservator or as a trustee or the executor, find a realtor who has experience in dealing with all those different forms of ownership or those different forms of fiduciary duty. There are many agents out there who work on weekends, who are not familiar with the contracts, who aren't as up to date with what the requirements are for different kinds of buyers. Find somebody's experience, look at their websites, look at testimonials, ask for references. Be sure you're getting somebody who's licensed in the jurisdiction that you're in and has practice in the neighborhood that you're in. There are a lot of people who think it's all transitory, and it's not always transitory. So be very careful and do due diligence in interviewing agents.
Okay, good. Well, listen, Hill, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come and visit with us. It's been illuminating, and it's great information for our viewers and for everybody in the metro area who's visits the Probate Nation website. I'm sure they're going to enjoy watching the show in years to come. So
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Selling real estate, whether in an estate or a conservatorship, presents a host of challenges if you want to maximize the sales price and not be left holding and maintaining a property for months on end. Our guest tonight shined a light on things to do and not to do as you undertake this task. What I take away from the discussion, however, is that it is critical to make sure you spend the right amount of money on improvements and repairs that are necessary and will serve to enhance the value of the property. But more importantly, how you present the property to prospective buyers, how you price it, can go a long way to getting the property sold in a timely manner for a good price. Strongly recommend to personal representatives and conservators that all of this is best accomplished with the advice and guidance of a good realtor. This concludes our show this evening. We hope you found it informative. Replays of the show and all shows to date along with other helpful information are available on the Probate Nation website. We encourage you to take advantage of this public service resource. On behalf of the Probate Nation, thank you for visiting with us.